Baruch atah Adonai. Elam shahakom baruch.
Amém.
L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim and bracha. Okay, good morning. Welcome to the mimer that we're learning now in preparation for Rosh Hashanah. It is based on Psalm 47. And we're specifically picking up on two of the verses, or in particular is one verse, the fifth verse, that says that God, He chose for us our heritage, the glory of Yaakov, which He loves. So we asked on this that this is speaking about our heritage, referring to our eternal heritage of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, which belongs to God. It's God's home, yet we call it the glory of Yaakov. Why? So we explained because ultimately, yes, the Holy Temple is God's home, if you will, and His dwelling, but its purpose is that He should dwell in us. So therefore, right, as it says, make for me a Vasili Mikdash, make for me a sanctuary, make for me a holy temple, and I will dwell amongst them. Them meaning the Jewish people, each and every one of us individually. God, Hashem will dwell. Excuse me. So that's what the deeper meaning of the verse is. But yet it also refers to the verse that God will choose that home in the future, right? Meaning the third holy temple that will be chosen by God to be His um, everlasting dwelling place, dwelling, not just at Jerusalem is everlasting as the capital, the place of God's dwelling, but it's now destroyed, the holy temple, so it'll be something to be eternal. But how does that fit in then with the meaning that it's reference to the Jewish people, that God dwells amongst them? So if God dwells amongst them, it also means that God will dwell in it in the future when in His future choosing. Now, the verse that comes after this says that God ascends with the blast of the shofar, and the name is Elohim, which is God of judgment. And then it says, um, Hashem b'kol shofar, the Hashem meaning His compassion with the voice of the shofar, which means that God first sits in the seat of judgment, and then through the blowing of the shofar, He now moves to the seat of compassion, and He has compassion upon us. Right? This is accomplished through the blast of the shofar. And based on this verse, we understand why this is the chapter of Tehillim that we say before the blowing of the shofar. We actually say it 7 times, right? So that's briefly what we learned yesterday. This continues. The Rebbe says that, well, we're not saying these two verses are specifically the second verse, right? Allah Lakim Bitrua Hashem B'Kol Shofar, right? That God is moving from the throne of judgment to the throne of compassion. We're saying the whole chapter. So that means the whole chapter has to have some kind of connection, right? It has to have some kind of connection to this idea of from the throne of the seat of judgment to the seat of the throne of compassion. And all the more so the verse, the preceding verse, right, being that it is the preceding verse, so therefore there must be even a greater connection. And as the preceding verse is, again, that God chooses us, for us, the glory of Yaakov, right? So there must be even a greater connection. We need to understand that based on this. We need to have further appreciation. What's that? So V'yivchar lanu means that God is choosing. What does it mean that God is choosing? So real choice is a uncompelled choice. Right? If I'm compelled to choose, you know, well, the example often I give, let's say a person uh, loves apples and is very allergic to oranges, and you have an apple and an orange in front of you. You're compelled to choose the apple. You love apples, and you're very allergic to oranges. So is it really a choice? Not really. Not really a choice, right? Real choice is because you're choosing. Well, if you're being compelled, then you're not really choosing. Does that make sense? Yeah. Thumbs up. We got, okay, good. All right. So, therefore, when God is choosing, it's the essence of God that is choosing. And in that choice, it's not because we did something to, to arouse, to compel God's choice, right? In other words, it's not because, we did in our divine service, good morning, something tremendous that awakened and God, oh, okay, I'm going to choose you. And that's a compelled choice. It's not a real choice. Real choice is that nothing forces you, nothing compels you to choose. You're choosing because you're choosing because you're choosing. Now, the truth is, if you look into your lives, look into my life, most choices we make are compelled, right? I'm teaching right now. Was I totally free to choose this is what I want to do? Or like, am I somewhat compelled because I know you guys are going to be here, right? So I'm not really choosing. It's like I feel responsible. You're going to be waiting and you're going to be, oh, what's happening? I'm going to get a text. Are we learning this morning? So now on one hand, that's a good point. That's good. I feel responsible. That's true. But then I'm doing it because of external reasons, which is fine because you feel responsible. Sometimes you wake up, you're tired, you're this, you're that, right? The kaya. So then you feel, okay, I better get moving now because, people are waiting. They're gonna, and, I've got to, da da da, which again, this is not, that's not a bad thing. But what's greater is that um, I choose to do this, you know, as it's, something I'm choosing because this is what I want to do. And, you know, because this is, a godly thing, a divine thing, right? This is my divine expression, if you will. So here, when we're talking about choosing, right? So God is choosing. It has no connection to us down here that we did something to make God choose. And in addition to the fact that the choice in actuality is his choice, and not, because we did something to, make him choose us. Because in the choice where God is making it, it's beyond anything that we can do to touch him, if you will. Okay, I hope that's clear. So this idea of God is on the throne of judgment and goes to the throne of compassion, and that the blasting of the shofar arouses, right? That God should, you know, move chairs, move his throne. And this is connected to the verses of the verses that we just explained, that God is choosing. And what is choosing? Atzmos, the essence of God, the core of God is choosing, right? In other words, so which means the verses are connected with each other. In other words, the fact that the Jewish people, they take the shofar, they blow the shofar before God, right? And they are now drawing down God's compassion, as we said, through our avodah, through our, right? Has to include also that God is choosing to have compassion for us. As it, since it's all connected here, so it's got to be that somehow, and this is what we got to figure out, that we are, through our blowing of the shofar, drawing down also compassion that God is choosing in us, for us, of us. How? Okay, that's where we're going to go with this. That's where we're going to go with this. And we can further elaborate on this idea that the Jewish people blow the shofar and we draw down also this choosingness of God, right? That means we are affecting God in such a way that He's choosing us. Right? As we said, how's that work? Right? Because you said it's God's choice, it is true choice, is not compelled. How are we compelling it? Right? We'll understand this idea because we know that the main idea of Rosh Hashanah is what we call Binyan HaMalchus, building up the kingdom. What happens is we're talking about through our blowing the shofar, we coronate God as king. The king there's Malchus, the divine attribute Malchus has an aliyah to its source. Metaphorically, like, the king um, is rethinking his engagement with his world, with his, like the CEO of a corporation, taking stock, rethinking on how he's going to um, re-engage with his corporation. So God is going back into himself, as it were, to think on how, as king, he is going to re-engage in his world. That's his corporation, right? The new life that he is going to bring to the world. How that's going to happen, right? That's the day of judgment. That goes to the compassion that we elicit through the blowing of the shofar. This is the idea of, and what are we doing through we're building the kingdom, meaning drawing down the light of God, the divine energy that we elicit through the blowing of the shofar, that builds the world, builds the kingdom, God's world. And how do we do that? Because we say before God, Malchius, things about kingship, that God should become our king. Right? And so we say passages about that, and we further do that by the mitzvah of the day with his shofar, which is the shofar is that we, through blowing the shofar, that we elicit God to become king, to become the king over us. And that's why it's the beginning. Even though, okay, see what, there's too much here. We'll have to go back on this idea. Too many ideas here. All right, folks. It's a pretty a deep and profound, and hopefully I'll bring it across well. All right, we'll continue. I'm going to the Ohel tomorrow morning, so I don't think there'll be a class. I don't know. There'll be what the schedule. I have to figure that out yet. But this class, I don't think will be tomorrow morning, because I think I will be. I hope I'll be mid-air. I'll keep you posted.